Welcome to Radical Underdogs. This time we're talking about why I retired from the last race and how you can avoid making the same mistake. So why did the car retire? Well, the car ran out of fuel. The interesting question then is, why did it run out of fuel? Well, it had enough fuel in to start the race with, and what happened was that the fuel return pipe exploded. It exploded not in a fiery way, but in a pressure sort of way. So when the car came back to the pits, half of that fuel pipe was missing somewhere on the track somewhere, and 10 to 15 litres of fuel had then disappeared into the engine bay and onto the track. Although it was unlucky to finish a race like that, I actually count myself lucky not to have caught on fire and it be much worse. Now, the reason as to why that happened is actually really interesting. Back in the winter, you'd have recalled me making a few upgrades, and one of those was to make refueling safer. So what I used to do before was I used to take off the fuel return pipe, attach another pipe, and then start the engine or run the diagnostic port fuel pump, and then pump the fuel out that way. Now that was fine, although you did spill fuel every time you did it. So I just thought it'd be a bit safer to use a dry brake connector. And that's what I did. So I replaced the fuel line with a dry brake connector and connected the two up. Now what happened in the second race was that the fuel pipe somehow exploded through the pressure being built up behind it. It's weird because there really shouldn't be pressure being built up. But the root cause of all of this is that the fuel pipe that was being used wasn't suitable for fuel. So over the winter I couldn't find the right size fuel pipe, so I ordered some more from a big reputable supplier in the UK, Demon Tweeks. I ordered the correct fuel hose from the supplier, and it came wrapped in a cellophane bag with the sticker on there. But what was supplied didn't have writing around it. And it did seem a bit flimsy. I did think that was a bit weird. Maybe I thought, well, that's a bit, premium hose. Maybe I've used to use cheap stuff in the past. I didn't really think too much of it. I mean, after all, it came from a really big supplier with all the markings on the cellophane wrapping, and they do cut it off from a reel. So I thought, well, maybe the markings just aren't on every single metre of hose you supply. I didn't need very much, I only bought a metre long. But what had actually turned out to be the case was it was incorrectly supplied. So there had been a mistake at the distributor side of things, and they had supplied me with vacuum hose rather than fuel hose. And whilst it fits, it doesn't hold pressure and it is not resistant to fuel. So what actually happened? Well, I don't know actually, because I lost a female dry brake connector. I'm not quite sure whether or not the connectors became disconnected, pressure built up, fuel hose exploded, and then the rest happened, or whether there was some other failure, or whether the fuel hose exploded, caused a vibration which caused the disconnect. I'm not quite sure, because the car had obviously sat in the assembly area idling, which meant that the fuel would have been running at quite a rate of knots through the return system because it's not using very much to run the engine. It then did the green flag lap, it did start the race, and it only failed, as far as I can tell from the video, halfway through lap 1. So the car had been running for 20 minutes or so by that point, which, if it was disconnected from the very get-go, I don't think the car would have lasted that long. And when I just tried to run it very briefly with that, it immediately pressure built up on the return side. So I really don't think it was disconnected from the start. The bit of pipe that was left on the car obviously is extremely brittle, because it's obviously been exposed to a lot of petrol, and it shouldn't have done. But the bit where it broke doesn't contain any witness marks of any place where it was connected to the dry brake connector. So it failed at a point before the hose clamp on the dry brake connector, which is interesting in itself. So how do you avoid making the same mistake? Well, I think the first thing to say is, when you receive a hose from the supplier and it doesn't look right, trust your instincts. And the second thing is, make sure there is the writing of what you ordered on the hose. And then the third thing, of course, is the reinforcement is quite obvious when you cut the hose. And if you don't have those things present, it is worth phoning up the supplier and checking that there hasn't been a mistake at their end, sending them pictures and making sure that the product you have is the one you ordered. Anyway, I've certainly learnt my lesson. Hopefully this helps someone out there to avoid the same mistake. Catch you again in the next one.
And future we're doing a bit of recording. So Demon Tweeks did get back to me, and I put the full response in the description. And to be honest, once the mistake's been made, obviously I'd rather it not have been made in the first place, but actually I thought the response was actually pretty reasonable. Let me know what you think in the comments.